What was the context of the statement? Where did this originate? This stand against on martial law, the candidacy of Bongbong Marcos or otherwise? What triggered this response from the Ateneo community?
Well, first of all, there was a direct challenge, no, from Senator Marcos. No? He was saying, I think it was in response to President Aquino. No? He was saying, if you wanted to look at the past, leave it to the historians and to the students of history. The past is past. He said that what I need to address are the needs of the present. So it was a direct challenge, no, to professors and educators, formators. And we directly responded to that. And we felt that there was a problem if you say past is past and there's no connection with the present. But there's also a broader context. Now, if you remember, the last several weeks we've been talking about EDSA, on the 30th anniversary of EDSA. We also were linking it with De La Costa's centenary. And then a couple of years ago, we were talking about the 40th anniversary of Father Arupe's Men and Women for Others. So there's a broader context also in the Ateneo that we wanted to commemorate this and say that there really is a link between the past and the present. And this is something that you cannot say that past is past, no? That there's something that needs to be addressed, no? Especially if there are distortions.
What should the younger people or this present generation know from that generation so that that response is connected? What is there something about martial law that we should know so that the judgment is not just of the present but also of the past?
Well, first of all, you have to look at the claim, no, that authoritarianism is good for development. Now, I think what Senator Marcos was saying was that it was a time of peace and progress. And he also said that I don't need to apologize, or at least he was saying, if I can apologize if there's something to apologize for. So in a way, I think that's problematic because first of all, there is an attraction sometimes, no, to authoritarianism because some people are, I guess, exasperated sometimes, no, with our politics, no, the limitations of our democratic system, no, that they say, for example, there have been no changes. So there is some kind of attraction again, no, to that kind of project, no, that the New Society project, that maybe what we need is a benevolent dictator. I mean, completely forgetting that we went through 14 years now of authoritarian rule. No? So that claim to sa ikauunlad ng bayan, disiplina ang kailangan, or democratic revolution from the center, I think that has to be addressed head on. No? That, for example, if you look at the record of authoritarianism in the Philippines, especially if you say that there has been corruption, even back to the Spanish times or even continues to the present, you have to be concerned, no, that if you have centralized power, all the more that will be a problem. And that's precisely what happened. No? So there's that one level that we have to address, no? The question of authoritarianism and its relationship with development, which really is something that continues to the present because it's not just the past. On the second level, you have to look at the claims of and the justification, no, for martial law in the Philippines and what they actually did. For example, no, I think this is part of the problem in some of the textbooks, no, in grade school, no, when they say, for example, that because of the problems of lack of peace and order and that there was a lot of dissatisfaction with our democratic system, Marcos entered the picture, as it were, to fight the left and the right to establish a new society, and therefore martial law was necessary. I think that has to be debunked. Because first of all, it was a power grab. I think people forget that, no? That Marcos' term was supposed to end 1973. And he could not extend, no, his term. There were efforts, for example, in the Constitutional Convention to shift to a parliamentary system so he could run, or Imelda could run. But those were blocked, no, in the Constitutional Convention. So at some point, his only recourse was to declare martial law to extend his term. So it was really meant to continue his power. So there's that element, I think, that needs to be addressed. And secondly, if indeed, no, there was some kind of katahimikan or peace and order resulting out of martial law, we also have to look at what were the consequences. No? What was the kapalit? No? Ano nangyari doon? And I think this is where you begin talking about the destruction of democracy, the arrests. People talk about extrajudicial killings, 3,250, 70,000 imprisoned, 30,000 tortures. I mean, this is a real cost. No? In fact, I was pointing out that to my students also that this is even more than the extrajudicial killings in Chile under a military government of Pinochet. No? Of course, it's less than Argentina, no? The desaparecido, but this is still a lot. No? So there are tremendous costs, no, in terms of human rights violations.
How much time does history really need, or political science need, to make judgment? Just to point out what Bongbong Marcos said, that diba, does history need that much time? Isn't 30, 40 years enough?
I think that's sufficient time. And remember that many people are still alive who actually experience this. No? So I think when you look at the signatories to the Ateneo statement, no? Both the faculty but also the alumni, no? Who have been signing also onto this, you really see that these are people who have first-hand experience of martial law. No? And therefore you cannot just say this past is past, no? Because they do have experience of this. But even those who do not have, now, in fact, part of the background to the statement is that the people who initiated this effort were really people young, 25 years, 20 years younger than I am, no? Which means these are people in their late 20s or their early 30s who maybe were very, very young during EDSA or maybe were not even born yet. But that means that they actually studied that time and could make a decision, no, about martial law. And I think the record is clear, no? Not just about destruction of democracy or human rights violations, but especially the economy. I remember that sometimes there's a claim that this was a time of progress or sometimes even golden age. Maybe it did not come from Marcos himself, but certainly his followers have picked up on that idea of progress and then used that to say that this is a golden age. But look at the record. Look at the record. Of course, we know that towards the end of the regime, it really collapsed. No? We defaulted on our debt. But even before that, no, you have to say, where was this growth coming from? I mean, look at the initial years of martial law. Well, there was a commodity boom. So certainly exports would go up, sugar, coconut. So that picked up initially until maybe 1974. But after that, with oil prices increasing and Arab countries having all of these excess dollars, which they put in the banks, this was the reason why you had a debt-driven growth. No? Nabaon tayo sa utang eh. From around 2 billion in the early 70s, $2 billion, umakyat sa $25 billion. And it would not be surprising why we would be very vulnerable. And then, of course, the question also of where was the money used? No? Bataan Nuclear Power Plant, $2.3 billion. We were paying for this until 2007. No? So it's not true that this is past, no? Because even when the economy collapsed in 1983-84, the drop in the income in 1983 to 85 was around 15%. We were not able to recover until 2003, 2004. So it took us 20 years. So is it surprising why we have been left behind, no, by other neighbors? We were growing through, but it took us 20 years just to go back to 1982 levels. So if talk about progress, I think it was a failure.
Why is it important for the Ateneo to be involved in this issue about martial law, Bongbong Marcos? Is it something that we're just doing because it's something about Bongbong Marcos, or do we need him to apologize for the sins of his parents?
No, this is not something personal. No? So this is not something that that he has to apologize for just because he is the son of Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos. So it is not that. No? The problem is his interpretation of that time. Because precisely, if you maintain that sort of view, no, that authoritarianism was after all good, and sometimes he even says that the EDSA revolution hindered what could have been a better type of growth for the Philippines, I think that's going to be dangerous. No? So first of all, you have some problem with regard to authoritarianism. And secondly, you also overlook the tremendous costs, no, which I think is very clearly in the record, no? Whether in terms of human rights violations or the economy, and then the cronyism. No? So some people say that Marcos initiated a revolution from the center. No? That's the claim of Marcos's book or his technocrats. But the problem there was that he did not really address the oligarchy problem. No? In general, he may have attacked some oligarchs, but he created new ones. And that's precisely the problem. When you have authoritarian rule and when you have a situation where there's always been that kind of elite relationship with business groups and the state, I mean, that can very well happen when you have centralization of power. We have someone who wrote on that period, no? Rick Manapat, wrote smart, some are smarter than others. No? And he showed the interlocking directorates, no? That the Marcos family had the connection with the businesses at that time. So, I mean, the cronyism problem was real. And therefore, that was a tremendous cost on the economy. And so, therefore, it's not a problem with regard to Bongbong Marcos having to apologize for his parents. The problem is that he doesn't acknowledge that this was a problematic period. And if you don't recognize that, that will be repeated. No? He doesn't have to declare martial law. He's saying he cannot declare martial law as vice president, of course. But if you maintain that sort of view, and if your followers maintain that sort of view, that's going to be dangerous. So it's not just about the past. It's about the present and the future.
Is this current initiative of Ateneo, of the signatures that were acquired and the steamrolling of opinion, is it because Bongbong is leading in some of the surveys and there's a big possibility that he could win as vice president? Is that the reason why all this talk has suddenly resurfaced?
Well, honestly, maybe that was part of it. No, that what has happened is that there's a greater urgency, because of what's showing in the surveys. But I think it's not the only reason, because people have been trying to address this problem for some time, and it's not just Bongbong Marcos, no? Because you do hear from other candidates the point of view that authoritarianism might be good after all, no? If you just get the right dictator. But I think that's problematic. And the other thing, what is our historical experience with authoritarianism? Because you cannot just say we can be Singapore, we can be Korea. No? I mean, we do have particular paths to history, through history, and also particular experiences, no, with our institutions, no, with our elites, with our government. So you cannot make that claim, no, that just because you could have something different or a different leader, that you would have a different result. No, because we do have 14 years of experience under authoritarian rules.
Are we asking him to apologize for the sins of his parents?
No, but well, not that he is responsible, no, as the son, and therefore the sins of the parents are transferred to the children or the heirs. No, I think that's not the point of view. But certainly, the society still has to recognize the fact, no, that a lot of the ill-gotten wealth have not been recovered, that there is still a lot of these questions about human rights violations that have not been addressed. I mean, certainly, I think you as a society, as a leader, not as a son, but as a potential leader, you have to account for that. And therefore, I think it's part of his responsibility to the present to acknowledge that past. So it's not as if past is past. No? Parang sinabi niya, iwan na lang natin sa mga nag-aaral ng kasaysayan. Ang aking trabaho ngayon ay tugunan ang pangangailangan ng kasalukuyan. But you cannot separate the two. There's a link between the two. As I said, even the economy of the past has an effect on the present. The whole militarization experience, no, has transformed the nature of our politics. The destruction of democracy, I think we're still feeling today. So I think you cannot separate the past, no, from the present and the future, and we have to be very conscious of that.